On September 15th, 2024, a young African man, Ekong Ishayet, and his cellmate Trayvon Brown set themselves on fire at Virginia's remote Supermax Red Onion State Prison. Ekong suffered third-degree burns along his legs and was hospitalized until September 24th for inpatient trauma care, including skin grafts. His cellmate's injuries were even worse. I met Ekong the day after he returned to Red Onion from the hospital. He had been placed in a cell next to me in the prison's medical department, where I overheard him talking with others about a series of prisoners, including himself, setting fire to themselves. I could not help but ask him what was going on. He told me simply that the racism and abuses, the hard and inhumane conditions at Red Onion were so intolerable that he and others were setting themselves on fire in desperate attempts to be transferred away from the prison. These were not protests, he made clear, but acts of desperation, hoping to get out of an insufferable situation.
I've come across a few posts in the past few days, primarily from Sister Jones, regarding the highly illegal and largely covered up abuse going on at Red Onion State Prison, located in Virginia. The man you heard is Kevin Rashid Johnson, an inmate at the prison who reported on prison radio about the conditions there that have resulted in a dozen inmates setting themselves on fire to escape the torture. But no one's talking about it.
The tragedy of what Ekong expressed was compounded by the fact that I understood his situation all too well. In fact, I had just 6 months before all of this underwent a 71-day, that is 2.5 months long hunger strike in protest of conditions at this very same prison. Actually, after just over a month on the hunger strike, people on the outside were questioning whether my going so long without food was a sign of insanity or were conditions so bad at the prison that I'd been driven to such extreme measures of protest. Ekong and his cellmates' own extreme actions answer the question. But the three of us are not alone. Over an approximate 2-week span during the same period that Ekong burned himself, a dozen other prisoners at Red Onion also set themselves ablaze, all suffering serious injuries. All were black. Not ironically, among those who set themselves on fire were prisoners whose mistreatments at Red Onion I had featured in prior articles in 2023. One being Demetrius Wallace, who set himself on fire twice. I've written about him in an article, Beating Time, Racist Abuse Continues at Red Onion State Prison. He was being held in an empty isolation cell in the medical department after he was tear gassed, beaten, and repeatedly called by a group of white-ranking guards while he was handcuffed from behind, all of whom were wearing activated body cameras. During the assault, so little did they care about any investigation or oversight.
You know, we've been conditioned to simply not care about any human rights violations that take place in our prison system because we feel that our desire for revenge is satisfied by abusing or killing the culprits that have harmed us. It's acceptable as a crime deterrent with the slogan, if you can't do the time, don't do the crime. But when we hear about convicted people resorting to self-immolation to escape the conditions that violate humanity, shouldn't make us re-examine the accepted purpose of abusive imprisonment? Maybe we should think about the mental state of prison guards that are willing to carry out the abuses without conscience and how they must see humanity themselves. Now, Johnson mentioned Demetrius Wallace as one of the 12 inmates that self-immolated to escape the abuses that he detailed, but it got worse for him. I did actually set my foot on fire, Wallace said. I got the charge that shows it. They came to my cell door and saw the flames on the side of my leg. They took me to medical. They assessed me right there that night, told me they don't deal with burns. They would have to talk with the nurse practitioner, and then I would have to be taken off the mountain. That was Friday, August 23rd. So Monday around 2 in the afternoon, they drove me 7 hours away to the VCU burn unit. As soon as the doctor sees me, he said, "When did this happen?" I said, "Friday." He said, "Why haven't you been here?" I said, "I'm not trying to be funny, but I can't drive myself from the prison." He said to the COs, "You see this foot? You tell your major I can't treat him immediately. I have to put him on antibiotics to treat the infection." I stayed in the hospital for 14 days. They had to do an allograft, a temporary graft using skin from a skin bank, and a skin graft. After 14 days, I was sent back to Red Onion State Prison. Harassed me. Everything is still the same. Stuck me in the hole, still being denied access to my JPay, a commercial email service for prisoners, or my actual phone. Asked why he had set himself on fire, Wallace said, "I got a lawsuit in because I was assaulted and sprayed by the COs twice while I was handcuffed. So as soon as I filed the lawsuit, they started retaliation. They denied my fiance access to the prison for no good reason. You had COs and a lieutenant looking at her Facebook. They messaged her. She has screenshots. The practices of Red Onion Prison aren't something that Kevin Johnson just cooked up for us to dismiss as another prisoner complaining about the time that he's serving. The prison was actually highlighted in a 2016 HBO documentary called Solitary: Inside Red Onion State Prison. It showed the practice of leaving inmates in solitary confinement for 23 hours a day, which obviously doesn't result in rehabilitation, but mentally breaking people down to cause them lasting mental harm, which obviously doesn't result in a decrease in violence.
Another prisoner who set himself on fire was Charles Coleman, who I wrote about in my article, another Virginia prisoner suffering life-threatening medical neglect. He had, in response to desperate attempts to receive needed care for multiple chronic life-threatening heart diseases, suffered repeated physical, verbal, and psychological abuse and denied treatment by Red Onion guards and medical staff. He is now being held in long-term solitary confinement at Red Onion. Although nothing has been even whispered about these terrors and the string of prisoners' desperate responses in the media or other public platforms, Virginia prison officials and government officials at the highest levels are aware of everything. In fact, a Virginia Senator, Russet Perry, recently visited Red Onion in response to these complaints of widespread abuses at the prison, which led to these prisoner burnings, but not to resolve the underlying causes. Instead, as I heard several guards tell Econ, they were simply not going to take prisoners to the hospital anymore who burned themselves, so that there were no more public exposure and protests and potential scandals concerning conditions so unsufferable that they were driving people confined at the prison to set themselves on fire.
Virginia State Senator Russet Perry did, in fact, visit a couple state prisons in the state and posted about it on September 7th, but there was no mention of responding to the inhumane reports of hypothermia and other conditions that prompted her visits. It makes you realize just how comfortable the people are that run these facilities in broad daylight. It's helpful that there doesn't appear to be anyone coming to right the wrongs that are being reported. Rather than expect accountability and humanity from our mass incarceration system, we'd rather see a dozen inmates set themselves on fire or go on hunger strikes for months, only to write them off as somehow having the ability to coordinate this dishonest campaign of abuse, when in reality, the environment that they're working under breeds inhumanity.
Red Onion and its twin supermax, Wallens Ridge State Prison, are both located in the remote mountainous regions of far southwestern corner of Virginia, in rural segregated white communities, while the prisoner populations are near totally black and brown. Since opening in 1998 and 1999, respectively, both prisons have operated with impunity and total lack of oversight in regions where the local populations are culturally conditioned to secrecy and hostility to outside scrutiny, which makes for prisons shielded by an iron curtain of secrecy, inhumane abuse, and racism. And while Virginia has been closing down many of its predominantly black staff prisons across the state, it has shifted resources and focused new prison construction projects in favor of operating prisons in remote, racially segregated regions of the state, like where Red Onion and Wallens Ridge are located. Every effort possible must be made to share this information and increase public awareness about these places, their inhumane conditions, and the desperation they are driving fellow human beings into in their pleas for relief.